And the Elementary and Secondary Education Act of '65, re-articulated in 2001 as No Child Left Behind, all, quote, ban federal departments and agencies from directing, supervising, or controlling elementary and secondary school curriculum, programs of instruction, and instructional materials. These federal bans were signed not by conservative Republicans. They were signed by Lyndon Johnson, Jimmy Carter, and Richard Nixon. Now, even for them, this is really a bridge too far to say the federal government will be involved in curriculum development and instructional practice guides. Is that an overstatement, saying that the federal government through Common Core is involved in curriculum and instructional practice guides? By no means. Let me give you a litany of things the federal government has done that has involved them in curricular materials and instructional practice guides. Well, this is sort of gray area, and I think it's probably absolutely, I'm saying not probably, it's legal that the federal government comes up with incentives and says to states, if you do what we want, we'll give you incentives. Right? That's legal. That's Race to the Top in 2010 coming out saying, here's $4.35 billion, we really want you to do X. Legal, absolutely legal. In 2012, there was a later Race to the Top round that was directed at districts, mostly at Texas, places like Houston and Dallas, where they're trying to get specific districts to adopt Common Core, because Texas State, the state said, we're not going to be involved. In fact, state law says that the Texas schools cannot adopt a federal or federally involved set of curricular standards. But here's where it gets beyond the gray area into a very clear trespassing of law. The conditional waivers to No Child Left Behind given by U.S. Secretary of Education Arne Duncan have never been approved by Congress. Past secretaries of education and past secretaries of all kinds of federal agencies have given out waivers, but they've never given out unilateral assertions of policy that contradict existing law. That's not legal. The two consortia, PARC, which Ohio is part of, and SBAC, received over $350 million in federal funds. Read their applications for federal funding. Explicitly stated in their applications for funding is that they will develop curricular materials and instructional practice guides. It's in black and white. The federal department has also created a technical review process for the two state consortia. The feds are actually overseeing this, making sure the work is done in the way they like it. And frankly, this is also against the law that Arne Duncan, for all the good things that he has done, and there are many, has jawboned states that have thought about pulling out the Common Core. That's actually illegal. So we get into this place where I would urge you as state legislators, we all have to recognize, I recognize as a private citizen, federal law applies to me, federal law applies to you, federal law applies to our state education bureaus and to our teachers. And federal law is not something that we should be willy-nilly willing to sacrifice or compromise. So there are also budgetary implications to HB 597 that I think are important. They relate specifically to PARC, but go beyond that. The implications in many of your minds, if you're thinking this through seriously, what's the implication of changing course midstream? What potential budgetary implications, what kind of impacts in the schools could it have? I believe there are significant financial benefits of moving away from the Common Core and away from unfunded mandates. Let me tell you a little bit about the cost of Common Core overall, and it might surprise you that in promoting this, proponents of Common Core have said it's going to transform education, don't worry, very few budgetary impacts. It's going to be easy. We're sharing stuff, so we're kind of sharing the cost, right? That's been the argument that's been made. There was no cost estimate for Common Core done with this rollout, not in the first year, second year, third year. Pioneer Institute was the first organization nationally that went and said, we actually should ask what this is going to cost. We took an empirical look at it. We hired an assessment bureau who had worked for the United States Department of Education and asked him this question: what will it cost in terms of assessments, professional development, textbooks, and technology? So what he came up with was about $16 billion. At least $16 billion, sort of a low-level estimate. The Fordham Institute, which is in part based in Ohio, also works nationally. An advocate of the core subsequently issued its own report, which was funded by the Gates Foundation. Conveniently, their estimates, I would say inexplicably, omit technology costs, which is the major cost driver of this entire effort. 3 points are worth making on cost. First, states will pay for Common Core implementation. You will pay for it. The reason why? 90% of education funding, if not more, comes from states and localities. The feds put in between 7 and 11%, depending on which state you're in. The race to the top funding, it's not going to cover even a fraction of what the costs will be. In Massachusetts, we received about $80 million for Common Core implementation. The cost of implementing in Massachusetts is probably somewhere around $400 million. Second point to make here. Since the release of our report 2 years ago on cost, funding requests, and we've tracked these in Florida and California and other places, have gone way beyond what we had suggested as cost associated with Common Core, suggesting that we significantly underestimated $16 billion what it will cost the country to implement Common Core. Then there's this other very important matter that Mr. Donnelly talked about a second ago, and that is PARC had 25 participating states in it before. It now has nominally 13. There are 12 states that have pulled out of it officially. I say nominally because that number 13 includes Louisiana, which is trying like crazy to get out of Common Core, and other states that are well on their path to pulling out of PARC. You probably have more like 9 to 10 states remaining. That means you're serving fewer students. That means your price point for PARC is likely to go up, whether in the short term or the long term. This, if you're in PARC, is something that is an unpredictable budgetary item that you need to think about. And I think pulling out, frankly, in devising your own tests based upon the kinds of standards, high quality, world-class standards that you really want, is a much more predictable pathway for Ohio. I would note, and this also builds on something that Mike was saying a second ago, accountability truly must rest with you. The reason is, when you think about this from a sort of political theory, government theory perspective, this is a theory of subsidiarity, and that is accountability should rest where the rubber meets the road, where most of the money comes from. If you're providing 90% of the funding, states and localities, the accountability should rest with you. You should not give up accountability to the 10%, the last investor. You have most at stake. You have to make sure you're getting the kind of accountability for results that you want.